we'll have the minutes of the actions. You don't have to go by expressions on our face and lip reading.
Is Fisher gonna be there?
No, but she sent a written report. Okay.
All right. It is 6:05. I'll call the meeting to order. Welcome and Happy New Year to everybody.
Happy New Year.
Hopefully everybody had safe and healthy holidays. I guess healthy, it's what is it, 2 years in a row now we're having to say that. So did everybody get the emails from the last couple weeks? Did everybody have a chance to review the meeting minutes?
And
Or sorry, the agenda first.
well, yes, if you'll start with the agenda, and then we need to
Yeah, we'll
talk
go
about
with
the
the
minutes.
minutes,
Thank you.
So did everybody see today's agenda? Any issues with it? Any discussion? Okay. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve.
A second?
I'll second that.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? All right, we're good to go there. All right, Cindy, I'll move it to you then on the approval of the meeting minutes for discussion.
Thank you. Can people on Zoom hear? Can you hear us? Not very well. Can you hear better if I'm facing you? Yeah, I know. Okay. Can you hear me at all? Yes, okay, good. So we had some questions about the minutes and the way some of the terms were worded. And the first problem was that we had an incorrect vote on the roll call vote. I believe, was it Mr. Thomas's? Mr. Thomas's vote was recorded as a no, and it was actually yes. And it didn't affect the motion. We knew the motion had passed, but it appeared in the minutes as though it had not, because his roll call vote was listed incorrectly, so we corrected that. There was also some question about some of the comments that were made around the motion. So as I was discussing it with other people, the board attorney and other committee members, not committee members, committee liaisons, I found that other committees said, well, Robert's Rules of Order say that you do not include the comments. All you include is the actual action. So if you saw, I sent one really late today, around 5 o'clock today, I sent revised minutes that just show the motion that was entered and the vote for that. And so I also included the pertinent section of Robert's Rules of Order, so that from now on, moving forward, that's how we will record our minutes. And then if you want to see exact comments that were made, we'll have the recording for you to go back and see that. So I just wanted to clarify that, because Ms. Hatter had made some comments that were not interpreted exactly the way she meant them to be interpreted, and we wanted to make sure that that was correct. And then when we read the Rules of Order, we saw that there should not be a summary there at all anyway.
But the motion itself is not listed entirely. It's supposed to be that the motion was interrupted and wasn't able to finish, and that Robert's Rules of Order were not followed.
The
That was in
motion,
the motion.
the motion, I took directly from the video. That is exactly,
I looked at the video.
that's exactly, the chair was asked to restate the motion. He restated the motion. He said, "Is that correct?" You said yes, and I wrote verbatim.
Okay, I
exactly
looked when
what he
I read
said.
it, so maybe I'll go
Yeah.
back and look at that.
Yeah. So that's how the motion was recorded. Or that's what was voted on,
Yeah.
was how he restated it. Okay. So with the revised draft minutes, now you can go ahead and ask for your,
So did everybody have a chance to see those, read them? So the revised ones? Because you sent out revised ones tonight at 5 o'clock.
right.
I didn't see them.
So that's what.
I
we're
can bring
approving.
those up real fast.
That's what we're approving, is the ones at 5 o'clock. So as
Right.
long as everybody saw the most current ones at 5 o'clock, everybody received them.
I can pull it up and show you the revised piece. Let me go back to Zoom and share my screen. So you can see the discussion piece was taken out, and then this piece where it says Mrs. Hatter made a motion to modify the minutes of the last meeting to reflect that she was not allowed to complete her motion presented to the board, that she was interrupted and she would like that reflected in the minutes. And that was a direct quote from the restating of the motion. And then a roll call vote was taken. The motion passed 5-4 with one abstention and one member unable to record a vote. That was because we weren't able to hear Mr. Freitas on Zoom. And Mr. Thomas's vote was changed to reflect that he did vote yes where it had been a mistake in the minutes. So those were the changes that were made.
Okay. Do I have a motion to approve the revised minutes from last month? I guess the most current version.
I make a motion to approve the revised.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
All in favor, say aye. Anybody opposed? All right, very good. Moving right along, so Ms. Fisher, I guess, is not attending in person, but has a statement.
She does have a statement that she emailed. Let me find the right one. I printed out all of the recommendations that were brought forward because, well, we'll talk about them in a little while. Ms. Fisher's. Okay.
And she ended up with phone.
There's 2 people in the waiting room. Are they
Oh,
supposed to
thank
be
you.
letting-
Oh, they're supposed to be in. I just didn't notice that. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Sorry, I can't. I'm
It's okay.
failing at multitasking
It's
tonight.
all right. No, it's okay.
So here's a message from Ms. Fisher, who is unable to join us this evening. January 12th, 2022, please accept my written report in lieu of my appearance. We continue to monitor legislative bill activity through our lobbyist, Capital Strategies. New session began January 11th, 2022. Our legal team continues to work on updated policies and keeping us in compliance with statutes. We are awaiting information regarding Neola, a company who monitors for statutory changes. There is work to be done on policy 4.221, suicide prevention, and a collaborating mental health policy. We will evaluate the board attorney by April 15th. Also, we are in process of working with the audit committee to hire a board internal auditor as required for our district. Work by our Healthy Living Collaboration continues, and they are involved in policy 4.223, allergy management, as we prepare to introduce PB&J as a protein-rich and cost-effective food into our schools for the first time since 2004. The superintendent search continues, and there are 5 semifinalists. We will begin interviews on the 18th and 19th of January. A search critique committee will be appointed to assist in the process. Information can be found on the district website. Respectfully, Mary Fisher. And we will include this in the minutes. Thank you.
I guess we can answer your questions. Is she gonna be at most of the meetings, you think, from this point forward? Or?
I think so. Yes.
What's the reason she's not, can we ask why she's not coming?
I don't know why she's not here this evening.
Okay. We have guests tonight from Student Code of Conduct, which I think my kids, I'm gonna bring this home to me tonight. Yeah, I guess it's, I've never seen it, so we'll see if they have. So welcome.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yep.
Start off with the introductions first. As Cindy's pulling up our presentation, that'll help guide us. My name is Brian Mangan. I'm the Director of Constituent Services here in our school district. And my role with the Code of Conduct on an annual basis is to facilitate the annual updating it, which is required by statute and requires board approval. So it's almost a year-long, more like 10-month process where we begin combing through it, seeking input, putting together that input, bringing it to the board. The board process takes approximately 6 weeks because it goes for a workshop and then a first reading and then a final reading. That's a thumbnail sketch of how it goes. With me is, I'll let her introduce herself.
Hi, my name is Tammy Scott. I am a coordinator in student services, and my role is attendance is one piece, and I'll put a shameless plug in, make sure that your students are in school. We really need them to be in school every day. It matters. It's very important. And I also oversee something called MTSS, Multi-Tiered System of Supports, as well as supporting lots of other initiatives within student services and the code of conduct revision is one of those.
Okay,
So, thank you.
before you all continue, I want to see if they can hear, and if not, we're going to need to do the computer.
Okay.
Zoom, are you able to hear our presenters?
So Tammy, your attendance
You
it
can hear
was
them.
important to me, so I was the one that created at Spring Creek Elementary School, I don't know how long you've been doing this, but
You can
my
hear.
kids went there.
I'm going to move the computer closer to them and see if that
They're
helps.
in high school now. So a while ago, but when they started kindergarten, I sponsored a Perfect Attendance Award there, and our biggest year while they were there, K through 5, we had 88 trophies given out, so I purchased trophies
Wow.
for the Perfect Attendance. And every year we would come in and I would present it at the end of the year, pretty much the last week of school. And there were multiple kids that came up to me saying, I got it last year, I got it the year before, and, so we had that growing up. And I don't know if you know, but Hewlett Packard has a national grant, that if you have perfect attendance from kindergarten through senior year of high school, Hewlett Packard will pay for 4 years of college for you, if you have perfect attendance. Now, it's very, very difficult, to do, but,
That's hard for the parent.
well,
Parents should get more.
but keep in mind also pre-COVID, could you imagine it now? I mean, if you had perfect attendance going into COVID, that would really suck if you were a senior
Yeah.
or.
Exactly. Yeah.
It would be bad.
So I will, later, I will enlist you in being part of our solutions team.
See that?
Okay? Thank you, Brian, for
Yeah.
that
It was,
information.
it was awesome, and the kids loved it, because a lot of the times it was the only trophy, or the first trophy a kindergartner or a first grader had ever received in their life. So we purchased, they were just $5 little trophies, and it was a perfect attendance trophy. And so my kids always wanted to have perfect attendance, and because they wanted to get a trophy from their dad at the school.
Very cool.
Good.
Thank you. I
And
wish,
we do have one other person joining us. She's on Zoom. It's Carol Ann Hogger. She's third one down from where we're at. Carol is the school counselor that works in our student enrollment office. She's also working on an advanced degree. And so she is required to do some projects. So she made the mistake of letting me know that she needs some project work, and I said I could always use some help in revising and updating the code of conduct. So Carol is able to join us via Zoom. She'll be monitoring the chat box. If there's some folks that want to put some feedback or some comments or questions in there for us as well. And so that's our 3-person team tonight. So thank you for having us.
Cindy, the chat box is not on, correct?
Chat box should not be being used.
No,
We've been told by the
Oh, my
board
bad.
attorney that no chat boxes.
All right, I just saw that up there and then, my bad,
Are we
my
able to turn it
apologies.
off?
I just saw the number up there, caught my eye.
Yeah,
I just
well,
don't
and
wanna get in
I
trouble.
didn't
Sure
notice
enough.
that, we're not,
Sure
yeah, the
enough.
board attorney
No,
has
we don't
asked
wanna
us
get
not to.
Okay.
Although we're still questioning that because DAC has been granted permission to use it, so
Oh,
we'll have to
really?
find out what the guidelines are.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's
Apologies.
interesting because in Zoom, if you're I don't know if you're recording this on Zoom as well as in person, but if you're recording in Zoom, there's a setting where you can actually record the chat box transcript as well. So you might want to
One hit Zoom,
ask them.
one
to
hit
look
record
into
on
that.
Zoom.
Yeah, so then if it's
We
being
do that.
recorded and put on the website, it's sunshine then,
Then
right?
we'll know.
So,
Yeah, that's
oh,
right, thank you, because we hadn't been recording
You
it
have to
because we
give
were
me
recording it.
permission to record. It
Do
won't let me
your-
Can you hit record on that
Yes,
recording,
I
please?
can.
Thank you.
to the cloud or the
Um,
computer?
to the computer, please. I'll never find it in the cloud. My cloud's really full.
All right, thank you very much. So our agenda tonight is give you a little bit of orientation to the code of conduct, talked a little bit about it already, about where we're at with the process and all. And then we're going to cover the major sections of the student code of conduct, which are the rights, responsibilities, interventions, discipline, and essential information. We have a special pullout from the code this year, the student dress code. We'll talk more about that a little bit. And then, a formal way of asking for a request for input. As we go through the presentation, if you had any questions or something to that effect, please feel free to ask. I think we're in a small enough group that we don't have to wait to the end, so if everybody's in agreement with that, okay, thank you. And Tammy and I will be sharing the presentation duties, so. All right, so our code of conduct, and I provided everybody who would like one a paper copy of the code of conduct. However, we went away from giving a paper copy to every student years ago. It was money saver. We were putting a lot of time, money, and effort into putting it out there. But we're still responsible for providing students and parents and all of our stakeholders the code of conduct. So we have a link there, and so since Cindy has this, it could be part of the record and all, but anytime you want to go to our district website, our main page, and you just hover over schools and it'll drop down, and that's where the code of conduct is, and this is a quick link right to that. We have it in 3 languages, English, Spanish, and Creole, and we have 2 sets of the code of conduct. We have the K-5 or pre-K-5 and the 612. What you have in front of you is the 612, and we'll be using that as a reference. One, I had more copies left over of my 612 than I do of my pre-K-5. And the big major difference between the two, honestly, is the 612 has a couple of additions that the pre-K-5 doesn't. One is driver's license, for the obvious reasons, and the other is about teen dating, violence, and abuse. So appropriately enough, they're located here and not the K-5. So as we're looking at it, please don't think that we're trying to hold something back from anybody. We're not, but it does have the, that difference and distinction I felt was important to make. Inside of the code of conduct, before you get to the major sections, we list our district vision, our district mission, and of course, Envision 2030. It's completely aligned with it to be that world-class school system to ensure each student achieves his or her highest personal potential. And then, of course, the 7 pillars that we look at as our core values. And knowing that you all have a continuous systemic improvement, I thought it was important to highlight that in here because that's one of the things that Cindy taught me years ago when we used to work on CSI as it was coming into the county back when she was over at Tropicalis, I believe. And so, excellence, integrity, high expectations, accountability, belief in students, and professionalism. Sorry, the 5 core key pillars. Additionally, inside of our introduction, which is kind of an overall overarching statement, we also have our statement of non-discrimination. It's important to note this because our statement of non-discrimination is word for word taken from our board policy. However, when you look at it, it doesn't look like how board policy is typically written. And this was something that the board had directed us to do last year when they first saw it, and they were like, wow, that is just one massive block of reading, not much of a visual breakups to make it easier to digest. So we reconstructed it, but we didn't change the information in there. So we talked about the areas that discrimination is not tolerated on, and all of the federal, state, and rules and regulations that apply to non-discrimination policies, as well as our own board state emphasis on the fact as well. Also, you'll notice that there's the points of contact that are required for the students and the employees are listed of who in our district would be the individual that somebody would reach out to in case they have an issue with non-discrimination. After that, then we start talking about our major areas of the code of conduct. So this is just kind of like the overview, the initial look, the introduction, and where we're aligned to and what we work on. With that, move over to our first. I almost forgot the part. That's why we use the top one. You are not the only group we're coming to. We do appreciate being able to come into this group for the first time. In years past, we've not been able to come to this. We didn't even think about coming to the Continuous Systemic Improvement Advisory Committee. That's probably a more accurate statement. And so this year, as we were reviewing where do we need to go and where can we run in our input, this is we asked Cindy, and she was able to facilitate with you all permission to come out here. As you can see, we do have other areas we're going to over the next couple of months. You can see that we have our Student Advisory Committee. We also visit our Success Academy students. We go to our other advisory committee members. Of course, we seek input from our district level administrations and our building level principals and assistant principals. And then, of course, it goes to cabinet. We're anticipating late March to bring it there so that we can take those revisions and get them ready for that 6-week journey and presenting it to the board. Those dates down below for the board are very tentative right now. Last year we had a similar timeline, but we wound up shifting 2 weeks to the right, so to speak, and we finished up the process in June. So this is our intended timeline, and I wanted you all to know where else we were going, who else we were seeking input from. With that, I'll turn it over to Tammy.
All right, so our next, our first major section is our rights and responsibilities. It starts out with the school personnel. We follow the Florida statute, so it's very important that, that we are all in alignment with our statutes and state board rule. Parental rights, our Parent Bill of Rights was, approved in legislation after this revision of the Code of Conduct. However, we already had a parent portal link built in, so we will work through that to make sure that our parents are well informed and it's visual for them in regards to the Bill of Rights. And then it gets into student responsibilities. So the student rights and responsibilities are really outlined in a way that this should be a teaching tool. It could be a teaching tool for our parents, it could be a teaching tool for our teachers, it could be a teaching tool for our administrators. And we will find that there's 5 levels of behavior or 5 levels of student responsibilities, and they mirror our levels of discipline. So, for example, in level 1, we're looking for students that understand how to follow the rules and expectations, they adhere to the school dress code, they're prepared for class each day, and you would find a counterbalance within the level 1 discipline section to go along with that. So if I'm working with a small group of students and there is an infraction of some sort, then I would want to pull this out and use it as a teaching tool, as a conversational piece. So what is it that you should avoid? What is it that you should look towards? Or what skills, skill building we need to look at? But this is a pretty clear guide and a really nice addition to our code of conduct the last 2 years. So that kind of really outlines the students' rights and responsibilities. So then we get into our interventions and our corrective actions. So for our positive behavior PBIS schools, just a side note, we have 29 model PBIS schools. We also have 33 schools of distinction, and those are recognized from the Florida PBIS project through the University of South Florida, USF. And that means that 90% of our schools have been recognized for their interventions and their positive behavior support process that they have within their school. Or they've started on that journey, yes. Which is a wonderful thing for our district and a very positive aspect. The next thing that we get into in the Code of Conduct is kind of like an outline of restorative practices and what it is. And for Lee County, restorative practices, we are focusing on 3 core strategies: effective communication, and you find those on page 34, proactive and restorative circles, and restorative conferences. So we're really utilizing the opportunities to talk with our students to get them engaged in a more productive process rather than everything being on the disciplinary, having a consequence that is out of school suspension or things of that nature. So we're really trying to turn that lens. After that, we get into multi-tiered system of supports. So we're looking, the book provides 50 different strategies, and based on the level of support that a student would need, depends on the tier level that they would have, that they would be in. So all schools, all students receive tier 1 core universal supports, and those are kind of outlined. I think there are 20 of those in the book. We put these in as suggestions for teachers, kind of as a resource guide. I work with a lot of parents that call in and say, I'm really struggling with my child in school, and what do you suggest? So the idea was a couple of years ago that we embed this within our code of conduct. So I do refer parents back to the code, we talk about it, talk about what that would look like within their home environment, what that would look like within the classroom, and we've gotten a lot of positive feedback in regards to those pieces. So those are definitely suggestions and things that we support within our schools.
The third major section of the book is our discipline area, and this had a lot of attention last year because we made a major shift. We used to have 3 levels of disciplinary behaviors. However, when you look at, and this is kind of going backwards a little bit, when we looked at the state has 4 major levels of discipline infractions. And we looked around and saw quite a few other districts were using 4 or 5. And so we made a suggestion, the board approved moving to 5 levels. And when you look inside, specifically over on pages 58, 59, 60, 61, 62, you'll see the different areas of it. And our level 5 is our most severe, our level 1 is our least serious infractions, and as you look through those different discipline codes, you start to get the sense of, okay, yeah, we can see why, horseplay, petty theft, skipping, tardiness. I'm not trying to, downgrade them or say they're not important. They are important, and they can lead to other issues if not addressed. But when you flip all the way over to 5 and you see things like arson, battery, homicide, you get the sense of what's more severe and how it should be addressed in such a different way. So that was a big thing and a major shift for us last year. And of those 45 codes that we have listed, 26 of them are given to us by the School Environmental Safety Incident Reporting System. Short term word is SESR. So when you hear people use the term SESR, that's what we're talking about. These are state mandated codes. Now, if you look inside of our code of conduct over on page 63, you can look at some of our codes and say, wait a second, Brian, some of these might be a little bit out of date. They are, and Tammy referenced it before. Our timeline does not synchronize with the state's timeline. It just doesn't. So when we have to have something ready and we have to backwards plan, not only is it getting it to the board in a timely fashion, but we have to look past the board approval, finalizing it, getting it ready for the website, getting it ADA compliant when it's on the website, and also getting a limited edition set of printed copies that we have to have out to the schools before the first day of school is our goal. And so the state, they might make changes as late as May, June, depending on what's going on with the legislative session, and or state board rules might change. And so we insert in here the Florida Department of Ed SESR codes and definitions, and we have a website. We know we can clarify that statement even more precisely to let folks know that if the state does change something or updates it, that supersedes what we have in the printed version or the static website version. And we make sure that our schools are given those copies, and we send that stuff out. And there's also a way for folks to reference it as well. So those are the state codes, and then there are 19 local codes that have been developed historically over the years here in Lynn County. And you'll notice that most of them reside in the level 1, 2, or possibly 3 areas of student misbehavior. What we do expect, and we get a lot of questions about, is in regards to the school's response to student misbehavior. And when you look through here, you'll see a lot of things that says, oh, infractions first time, it's a level 2 or a level 3 or a level 4. And, first, repeated or major. The old way of doing it used to be, student does this the first time, this is the consequence, there's really no thought, no consideration, and second time they do something wrong, that's the next consequence, and it's just like taking the steps, forward without really thinking about it. However, our administrators and people who are working with student discipline, whether it's deans or assistant principals or principals, are required to take into account all the multi-factors that makes up a student. Does the student have an IEP? Does the student have a 504? Does the student, have something else going on with the NTSS plan? Is the student a really young student? And unfortunately, we have young students who do something that's crazy and wrong, But you gotta take that into account as well. You just can't sit there and say, well, we're done with this kid, but wait a second, we're dealing with the first grade, you know? And there's mitigating factors that you have to take into account before you institute, discipline. And so that is why, one of the reasons why we have more of the options that are laid out. And then you could well imagine that schools are different. A small little school like Fort Myers Beach Elementary that has a little less than 100 students has a lot different issues than, say, Lehigh Senior, which is our biggest school, which has over 2,700 students. Age differences and all that other stuff. So, and I know we have the two levels of code of conduct, but even if we throw out the 6 through 12 area, you look at it like, a school like the Sanibel School, or you take a look at a high school like Riverdale High School. Again, big differences, and also you have to take into account, how is that principal, working with student, discipline and behavior inside their building. This code of conduct serves as the guide and the way to keep us here as opposed to being all over the place, but then again, not on such a straight, narrow, one-way, only defined line that would really cause a lot of issues for us and had caused issues in the past when it was, this is the only way to respond to a student misbehavior. Then that brings us to our last area. This is the smorgasbord, the catch-all. A couple of years ago when we redesigned the code of conduct, this stuff was scattered throughout. And so it was intentionally designed to move all this essential information into one area and to alphabetize it. So I just highlighted a few things. Attendance, as Tammy talked earlier, is a huge issue this year for us and continues to be, but this is, our approach is based off of Board Policy 4.16. Bullying and harassment. That is tied directly to the Jeffrey Johnson Stand Up for All Students Act, which came out of Lee County a number of years ago due to a very tragic circumstance, but has become the way the entire state does it. And so every 3 years, this is supposed to be updated. Bullying harassment procedures, we're not at that point yet. I believe next year becomes our 3-year cycle, if I remember correctly. So this year, no, we don't have to do a major revision to it, although if there's stuff given to us and it's, should be added in, definitely be making a recommendation to add it in. But for a major overhaul, that'll be due up next school year. A lot of people ask about buses. The bus is considered an extension of the school. So if a kid gets on the bus and drives away and does something wrong, that is a student still held to the code of conduct. With all of our students having a Chromebook, computer and network usage is a huge thing, and we do run this through our IT department and asking them to provide feedback. Makeup work, which is also covered in Board Policy 4.16, addresses it. A lot of people say, what's the makeup policy? Thumbnail sketch of it is, if you're absent for 3 days, you have 3 days plus one more day to make up that work, and then at the full credit for the student who might have missed those days. Mental health instruction was something that people have asked about over the last year or so, and that is not this most recent legislative session, the one before it required that there's mental health instruction to give to all students, so we've captured that and keep this in our code of conduct. And then the hot button topic that I've had some calls about this year is about the Pledge of Allegiance. And a lot of people say, no, the kid's got to stand. Well, technically, no. And according to state statute, if the parent provides written statement, the kid does not have to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. And so that's something that folks sit there and there's a patriotic side of individuals, myself included, that says, hey, you should stand, but wait, pump the brakes, let's be real here and say there is a way. Yes, you and me both, yes. So those are the major things. Before we tap on the shout out of student dress code, any questions or anything about this kind of overall orientation that we provide so far to the code of conduct?
Yeah, I have a few.
Sure.
My daughter, her name was Reese Hall. She was actually one of the 4 that was chosen to revise it 2 years ago. So her name was on the cover, and that was really neat. She was the chair of student advisory for 2 years here, and then she was selected from student advisory to work on the code of conduct. So she worked very closely, interviewed students from all over Lee County, and she's one of the ones that made some of these really big changes with Dr. Bohash. So I would say I'd love to see students involved. I don't see any students' names on this one. I think that's great. It gives the students ownership, and when students see their peers getting involved in that, it's huge. You know what I mean? I think it gives them buy-in. That's one thought, if you want it. Another one that she had talked to Dr. Bohatch about, which I think they were looking at trying to do for the 2020-21 school year, but then COVID hit, and I think a lot of things didn't happen, was there's still that narrative out in the community that a lot of parents don't read this, a lot of students don't read it, and so it's a lot, but there's good things in it. So I know they had looked at making some type of like quiz or I hate to use that word because that's
Sure,
like
I get
with
your
high
point.
school kids, but
Yeah,
like
get your point.
some type of system where like when you're in, probably not for elementary, but maybe middle and high
But you
school
read
kids,
it, that you
when
know,
you're
yeah.
that first week of school, when you're going through all the orientation and the stuff with the school, that like the students would be required to kind of look through it and know, because it's hard to expect all this of kids if they don't know what's expected, and I just don't think parents and students read it. So some type of quiz where they're like learning about the 5 discipline levels or something, and maybe they
It's an
get
interactive
a
type of,
homework
yeah.
credit or something for it. Anyway, that's another idea. One other thing is when you're talking about the enforcement of some of this, I still think in Lee County we have a lack of consistency of how it's enforced around our schools. Like you could go from one school and see different things. So when you said that about there's different considerations taken with kids with like maybe an IEP or plan, I think that's good, but I think a lot of times the kids that need that extra support or maybe that second chance maybe aren't the kids with that advocacy at home to have those plans, so I hope we're taking that into consideration.
Can we go back to her second point? How do we get this out to the student?
Well, and
So good, do they get the booklet or they get a link or?
well, schools are required at the beginning of the year to include this as part of their back-to-school orientation type thing. So, I would say, you know, when you sit there and you're back that first couple of days, if this is in there, how much of it is that the student really retaining and remembering? So the students, but the schools are responsible. There's no way that we could do a presentation that would, again, going to the one-size-fits-all thing, wouldn't really work. So each school is required. Being a former school principal, what I would do is I would sit there and I would have a school-wide presentation, then I would have my teachers, typically the English teachers, because everybody had English, so I'm not picking on English teachers, but everybody had them. So they would have the time to sit there and go over the school-wide presentation and be able to ask those questions individually with the kids, you know, in a group of 25 to 30 as opposed to 500 in a, you know, a freshman class or 2,000 in a high, you know, total high school. But again, it would be it's really coming upon school, they have to.
So
do
it's a
it.
catch, it sounds like it's a catch can, it's not really, in corporate America, you have an employee handbook.
Yeah.
Okay, when someone's hired, they gotta go through that handbook and they gotta sign off an initial and date.
And you used to have to with that,
Because they're responsible for their behavior, you know, in the workplace
Right.
and beyond.
Yeah, they're still responsible, and you mentioned before, they went away from the paper version, but what happens at the beginning of each year, they started it 2 years ago, didn't do great because not enough individuals had focused parent portal accounts. But once you open up the parent portal account, it's one of those things like kind of filling out your
Emergency card.
emergency cards and things like that. So there is something where they're supposed to electronically acknowledge that they have it.
I
Now-
don't think that was included when I looked at my focus of the forms I
Okay.
signed, that was not included
Gotcha.
this year, and I have kids at 2 different schools.
Okay.
So my company was bought by Blue Cross Blue Shield 3 years ago, and owning a company, you're just plugging and chugging, right? Now that I'm part of Blue Cross, I think it's frustrating. My staff, you know, they're used to it, I guess. Now every year, we're sent a link. We got to click into that link, including me. I have to go in there and I have to watch 1.5 minute videos of which websites I can go to, and how to find a fake one, and what happens when you harass an employee.
Right.
And I have to pass the test that at the end of it gives you 3 questions. That's what corporate America is doing, and that's.
We do that as a district employees.
As
the same
employees,
thing.
so my question, my thought process is, because I can bring these home to my junior and senior, and I can guarantee you, they don't know half of the stuff in
Right.
there.
Right.
Not that I would ever expect them to know the entire book, because I don't know everything that Blue Cross is asking me, but it should be it should be something that they talk about and they're aware of, just like me saying that this thing, the kids are gonna have to deal with it the first
First
week
what
of school.
Mrs. Hall was saying,
Yeah.
absolutely, about having some type of
You could have some kind of random, hey, here's a link, and each kid's getting 2 videos, and they have to watch them, or 3 videos, and then they gotta answer questions. You're never gonna be able to touch the whole thing for
No,
everybody,
no.
and you wouldn't want a
No, but you
30-minute
take
quiz.
the major infractions, whatever
The
those,
most common or whatever.
yeah.
The most common.
And I would agree with you, because we can look at our discipline data and say, okay, at X, Y, or Z school, what is the major thing that they're experiencing there?
Yep.
Is it disruption, is it insubordination? And they can target it. I know one thing that we've just done for our principals is send out that gentle, poke the bear reminder, hey, make sure that you're resetting your expectations. You're doing it in the format that is COVID friendly, whether it's classroom visits or school news or intercom. You know, I mean, ideally, you know, it'd be better to get get more kids together than, but we can't
And
do
you
that. at
own the
moment.
computers, a
Yeah.
bubble could show up every day at some point saying, here's a reminder, right? Here, take your test, or here's a rule, or here, this is what happens when you smoke, or
Google
whatever.
Classroom, I have
Yeah,
Yes.
they're,
reminders.
Yeah.
they should be able to pop up like that. The thing that I'm most sad though about is, it's sad that you guys have to address this and recreate it every year with all the new garbage that's coming out, right? I can guarantee you, we all went through K through 12, and they didn't change any of the rules, there was nothing
It was,
new that was.
it was common sense.
Yeah, well, there was really nothing, I mean, whatever somebody did 10 years ago or 20 years ago, that's continuing that day. Now it seems like every year you have to be on top of all the new stuff.
The children used to be taught to respect the teacher, and the teachers were backed up at home, and now it's, not my kid, you're targeting them, you're bullying them. The teacher's fault now, it's not.
And there's
it's not
good
my
and
fault.
bad of that. I mean, I've got kids in my kids' classes here at Bonita High where I sit there and go, are you kidding me? If I said that to a teacher, they would have kicked me out of school. And these kids are allowed to say it because they have some designation. So maybe that's good now that we're recognizing that designation, but if it was back 20 years, 30 years ago, we would have been thrown out of school if you told the
Yeah.
teacher some of the things that these kids are saying to them.
One of the ideas I had based on what Randy was saying about including students and what Brian was mentioning about the online, you know, I don't wanna say testing, that's not it, but
Sure.
we do it at the university
Orient-
also, for all the
orientation.
different subjects that all the employees have to be aware of. Why couldn't we use some of the technical programs, like I'm thinking of Dunbar High School, where the students could take this code of conduct in the
Yeah.
platform and build the online training?
And they were
with
doing
the
it.
built-in assessment.
I don't know what happened.
And then if every student in the district has a Chromebook, then it could be something that appears on their Chromebook at the beginning of the school
Sure.
year, and then they
Or
would
on a
have to
quarterly
check,
basis.
you know,
Yeah.
some really informal assessments throughout to make sure that they understood the
Don't you
content.
think that them having access to something that says the students' rights, I think that would interest kids. You know, because if they don't understand that concept and that there is a little bit of personal responsibility.
I think all they read is the dress code.
Probably, but I mean, but I still think that
And they
if,
forget it the next day.
it's true, but I really believe personal responsibility comes with directions. And I think this is, if we talk about, okay, this is gonna teach you, and if you're not getting it at home, on what is the appropriate, mom and dad aren't telling you. You know, maybe they're not, I don't know, I'm just saying that, and maybe that's not in all families, I'm just saying that, especially if we wanna give them a hand up, we need to work on helping them understand the tools that respectful, good behavior, that this is a good tool. And I don't think it should be, you know, something that they optionally take a test on. I think that, and it can be like you're saying, I think that's an excellent idea to put it in with the principals within a very specific classroom where things are addressed. Because you can't ask them to be responsible kids if they don't understand what that means.
For the younger kids in the cafeteria, you could have it on during lunch and give like a sweetie, you know, Smarties or whatever, you know, if they get the answer right at the
Yeah,
end or
and
whatever.
peers teaching peers. I think she
For the
had,
little ones.
where her daughter had such a great experience. That young woman teaching younger kids that, or other students that, is very powerful. Because if we're just, you know, as parents, if we're just saying it's just one more thing, and teachers are just saying it, if you did it where, maybe as part of the orientation process, kids that have that experience that are older can say, hey, we designed this, and we did this. It's very empowering on both sides. and then they see the impact. I don't know, that's just my.
Well, they do that on college campuses now, they have
Right.
the juniors and seniors do the orientations for the freshmen. And it really,
Right.
it really
It
makes an impact,
has-
to your point, it does make an
It
impact.
makes it, well, especially if they're in the process of developing what the content is. There's a twofold part to that.
Did you guys use students for this?
Yes, and I heard what you said before, yeah, and I remember inheriting this from Dr. Bohat, and I'm like, yeah, they had names. So we went with the student advisory committee, and we had, last year when we went there, the room, we were at South High, and we spread out, but we pretty much filled South Fort Myers High School's cafeteria when we spread everybody out, and there was kids from every single school was represented. That's why we didn't go with the individual names.
Okay.
And then we also go to Success Academy, and that's, for people who've been around here a long time, that's the old ALC. And so we even go to the kids that have really run afoul of the code of conduct and say, hey, talk to us, because if anybody knows what the consequences could be, it would be all. This year, when we address the principals, I'm gonna put it out there, if any of them would like to host myself and Mrs. Scott and Ms. Hogger to come out and maybe meet with a particular organization inside their school, whether it's the student government, an Interact Club or something to that effect. I can't go obviously to every single school and get it done in a meaningful time, but if we target a couple of schools, spread out over the zones and different levels, we can get additional student feedback on it. So that's the intention. I didn't have it up there because I have not approached the principals, so please don't tell principals I'm gonna go out there and do that just yet. I'd rather tell them first than, so, yeah.
The last thing I would add is just, I think the goal of this book should be to have less infractions, less discipline, to get the communication out there so great that we're having less discipline. That's what got her interested in it and why she joined that committee. When she was a sophomore, I believe there was like a random drug type, I don't know if it was dogs or a random like backpack type check at a school, and she was volunteering at teen court at the time, so she was pretty well versed in the legal system by 15, and so kids started saying like, they don't have the right to check my backpack, it's mine, it's private property, and so she started like telling kids, hey, when you have anything on a public school property, it's not yours, they can
You're
search it.
subject to
So she got
search.
super involved, and she was like, that needs to be, so like, that was her recommendation, that be right in here, like, you can be searched, like,
Yeah,
it's
that's
like,
true.
if you're bringing it, they can find it.
And yeah, and we do have that in there because you're right, it's student search and
Yep.
seizure board policy 4.03 and.
That
That is
was
really
retaught my daughter.
Yep. Well, I don't wanna cut you off, we'll come back to it, but I saw,
Yeah,
Mrs.
Lucinda.
DeFreitas, so her hand's up, so we'll definitely pop back to you because she's had the hand raised for a while, so Mrs. DeFreitas?
Whereas I agree with the group that having the kids involved is definitely a benefit for all. But I feel like as parents, we're the ones who, in essence, are responsible for, providing that message to our kids, and then in turn, they, are to, I guess, have a higher level of responsibility when they're in schools. So I feel like, to a certain extent, just like the emergency part, I think that you said that it's in the focus portal, and like it's somewhere embedded in there. I feel like somehow if we could make it where once we do the emergency part and we update that, almost like, even if it's a course or whatever, even just a checkbox with those highlights, okay, here's the dress code, and instead of having like big paragraphs, like just those bullet pointed highlights for the parents to visually see, okay, look, they can search my child if they're bringing anything that they're not supposed to school. Things like that, that way, because I know when I read it, then I go back to my child and I'm like, look, these are the things that you need to make sure that you are attentive to. And so we can relay that to the kids as well. And then when they go to school, they have to do a course or whatever it is that's decided, then it's almost like that reiteration, that message is consistent. And so when they get in trouble, then the administrator is consistent. So that consistency between the parents and kids and administration, I feel like is key to the code of conduct.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I have a couple things.
Mhm.
The consistency is a big thing at the schools. We had one school where, talk about varsity cheerleaders, one got caught with the dab pen, which is marijuana, on school property, had to miss 2 games, that's it. The other school was just pictured at a party, wasn't drinking, but other kids around them had alcohol in their hands, and they were kicked off the team. So one had drugs, just missed 2 games, the other was just at a party and was kicked off. I mean, that's a big difference. And, I mean, especially having it on school property, I thought it was like a major offense, but apparently it wasn't. And then, and it's probably important to understand, like, you know somebody personally who's been on the victim end of this, but bullying, especially at a high school level, I don't think it's a level 2, because then a level 3, you have disruption, alcohol, forgery, theft, vandalism. I don't think any of that is a more severe. I think it's all way lesser than, especially ongoing bullying. That drives kids to suicide. It can affect them for the rest of their lives. I know the student who they even found in the investigation widespread, ongoing bullying. Widespread, one person was reprimanded, we don't know how, because they never missed any school or anything, so they were still participating in all their activities. Remained on student government, were running for student government the following year until the victim's parent was like, no, they were supposed to be removed from that. Oh yeah, we missed that. What does that say, and how did that look to the victim? If it's widespread bullying, they see that on the outside, it looks like nothing happened to the bully. So now there's like complete social exclusion, it's like, you're the leper now. And it looks like they got off scot-free and they were fine with it. And it continues. So I definitely think that isn't taken seriously enough. It's happening.
Elevating bullying
It's
up to a
happening
higher
today.
level. Okay.
To this very day, it's been going on with the student for 2 years, and it's horrible to watch. And there's no, on the outward appearance, there's no consequences for the bullies, none. And they can, when they're like, oh, trust us, it's been handled and will not happen again. They were on social media doing it to somebody else days later. So I definitely think it shouldn't just be left up to the individual teacher or school for something as significant as bullying, and that can have a
Lifelong
fatal
lasting impact,
outcome
yeah.
or a lifetime of
Right.
pain and hurt and cause a lot of problems in their lives. I don't think that should be up to the principal where one's gonna handle it and one's not.
Right.
And it has gone to the district level and it still hasn't mattered. So I really think that needs to be taken more seriously.
Thank you.
Mr. Megan, to Ms. Hatter's point, how are the behaviors classified into their various levels? I mean, who makes that decision? How are those decisions made?
Well, that's part of this process right here. So when she says, hey, I think bullying should be moved up, unless everybody in the room was like, no, pretty much sensing agreement through the room, then we would make that as part of the recommendation going forward. Now, it just doesn't spring from one committee, and that's why we want to show everybody that we go on, bring a wide loop. And so this could be something that, we could easily share with folks saying, hey, not giving and attributed right here, but say it's been suggested this. And because if it doesn't come up in another group, we can prompt that thought. And maybe they say, yeah, you're right, we didn't think about that. Or they say, no, it's fine where it is. And we can kind of start gauging it. Because it puts,
Corrective actions,
Yeah.
restorative practices for high schoolers that are bullying widespread, letter of apology, reflective assignment, that doesn't do anything. I mean, if they're already a high schooler, they know better.
What page are you on?
59.
and so looking at that type of stuff and saying, okay, where should this be moved to and how should it be
I know we
raised up in
discussed
there?
that
Yeah.
4 years ago at the CSI meeting when they came in and spoke to us about the 5 Rs. And I was like, that's great for elementary school,
Mhm.
but at high school, it needs to be, it's a more severe offense because they're doing it to a much larger degree, and I think the consequences should also be heavier.
I think with these iPhones, this is multiplied
Yeah.
20,000-fold.
Social
I mean,
media is-
both my granddaughters, and they're good kids, they've both been victims, and they're like 7 and 12. They've both been big-time victims of bullying. I mean, it's happening everywhere.
Yeah, social media.
So
And
it's-
girls are the worst.
and it has to be-
I mean,
so it has to be
I mean, we're just
addressed.
nasty creatures.
Yeah, but
That's what it
it's
is.
it's everywhere, it's in adults too.
I know that, but
The
but,
phones
you know,
and
you-
social media allows you to say a lot of things that you would never say to somebody's face.
24/7.
but adults can handle it better than a little kid. You get some little kid that's 12, that's where you get the suicide nonsense.
Yeah.
You know, they don't know where to turn. The peer
They tell you
pressure
to
is.
kill yourself, and one kid,
Well,
you know,
yeah,
messaged
they
my
don't-
daughter, I hope your brain tumor kills you. Like, I mean, it's just horrible, and I don't say things, I'm like, I just told her, you know.
Yeah.
They weren't taught right.
Shutting it off,
Sorry.
blocking them, ignoring it, if we tell kids that, but
And
some
they don't
kids.
wanna block, 'cause she was always afraid to block something, it
Yeah.
causes more drama.
And-
I don't
and-
get that,
And it's that weird dance of the social media world,
At that age.
and us not being digital natives like that, we're looking at it going, you just ignore it, and
Yeah,
does that really resonate with a 13, 12, 17-year-old?
and they don't.
And for some of them, where the social aspect is huge for them, it doesn't resonate with them, and they can't get past it. And that's where the mental health piece starts coming in, you say, okay, now we understand why the state put this mandate on it, and how do we work that?
But I think it would cut back on that if there was greater consequences for the actions.
Right. Hence, they suggest Ms. Peck.
How do you essentially look at your return on your code of conduct? How do you chart your trends in disciplinary actions? And do you make modifications on your 3-year cycle in reaction to those trends?
Well, and just to clarify, the 3-year cycles for the bullying and harassment policy, that's state mandated, but what we do is right now, we look at our student discipline, our referrals and our minor infractions that come through. We use Focus as our system for that, so we can look at, as I said before, if a school has a preponderance of insubordination referrals, what's going on there? And are there, and then we can even look at what type of responses the school has done to it. And so, okay, hey, sit down with an admin team, say, you guys have a lot of insubordination and you're doing these type of responses, but your problems are still escalating. Now we gotta use this as a resource and revisit what you're doing there in order to do what we want to see, a decrease in those type of
Is that done,
referrals.
how often is that done?
Well, we're about to hit the first cycle of this year with the student services discipline and attendance chats. It's tied in with the school's academic discipline data chats, academic data chats that they're doing. And so we do that here at the semester. We'll do it again, of course, at the end of the year when we do the whole entire year's worth of data. However, the state has also required that we do what they call Survey R reports. And Survey R reports are every month, this district automatically pulls all of our discipline data and sends it up to the state, and the state has that. In the past, the state would just publish it once a year. Now, I have not seen them take the Survey R data and display it as of yet. When I talked to the Office of State Schools, they were working on how to present that to all of our stakeholders across the state. So we are looking at it as a monthly thing, because schools are supposed to go through and make sure that they process the referrals correctly, that the information in there is accurate. And then this gives us an opportunity as a district to make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. Are they over-consequencing a student? Are they not taking it seriously? And, that could cause problems as well if they're not accurately reflecting the type of discipline actions that are happening in the school and then what their responses are to it as well.
So that's monthly?
The reports go up monthly, but to sit with the schools, right now, we're doing it on a twice-a-year basis. But if I'm a principal sitting in the school, knowing that I got this monthly report going up, a lot of our schools have professional learning communities that focuses on that on a regular basis.
Do they have to report every complaint and investigation that they do at each school?
Well, what we're reporting up is the discipline stuff, the referrals and all that other stuff. If there is a complaint about bullying or harassment, if it's substantiated, it's captured inside a referral, so that goes up. If it's unsubstantiated, we're not allowed to tie personally identifying information to an unsubstantiated, but we still have to report that there was a bullying investigation conducted and it was unsubstantiated. So instead of a referral, we report up something called a discipline incident.
And do you look at schools that have a lot that they find unsubstantiated to know, like, hey, they're not doing proper investigations?
Right.
That's an issue
Yes.
as well.
And that goes
Okay.
through our PBIS department, to look at that, because every time a school does a bullying or harassment investigation,
Oh.
they have to send a copy to the district as well as maintaining the copy and reporting it through
I'm in full support of the students doing some type of training, student-developed training, and whatever changes are made to the code of conduct, having students be part of that. But in addition, I'm wondering if we could make the notification of parental rights more visible to parents, whether that's part of the focus
Oh, yeah.
portal or
Well,
some
and
other
the
way.
parent bill of rights, yeah,
I
absolutely, yeah.
think that
We gotta-
section that's on page 15, I guess it is.
Maybe send
Maybe
it out.
we
I
can-
forget what we do for that, what is it called, is it Peach Star or whatever, the thing that they
Yeah, but, yeah.
When you put it something like that, so they get it on their phone, you know, if they get a text, I
Yeah.
think they're more likely to read it than to go search on the website themselves.
And my suggestion would be that parents have to acknowledge that they've received it, because I think that might cut down on some current communication issues that, parents aren't aware of their rights, maybe. And this would be a way to ensure that they receive them.
Well, and then I know we're starting to, we might have gone longer than you wanted, but I do want to touch on this last part of the student dress code. The beginning of the year, the dress code received significant attention. Change.org petitions were out there were media stories, and there was also folks who approached the board at the comment section and made their cases there. The concern, in a nutshell, and at the risk of putting it too succinctly, is that the student dress code is sexist and discriminatory, mainly against female students. So what I did here, and yes, it looks terrible up there to sit here in the PowerPoint, but I'm glad everybody has a paper copy here. But for our committee members there, this is word for word right from the code of conduct for our district's student dress code.
What page is on?
That would be over on page.
94.
But each school can have their own.
Yes, they can, however, they have to, this is like the baseline.
Now, some schools you wear open-toed shoes, some you
Yeah.
can't.
And when typically the example I would give something like that is the middle schools and the elementary schools that tend towards a uniform or a modified uniform, the khaki pants and the collared shirt and, so that type of stuff. But even then, they have to get to that point, following board policy and having the community support on all as well as it. And so having been shared with that, and we did actually, back in September, go out and meet with a couple of the students that were featured in the media stories about, their concerns about the dress code, and we received feedback from them also. So what we're asking each group that we sit down with is please take a look at this, read through it, and then, not to overwhelm, but since you have it in front of you paper-wise, these are the bullet points that you also see on page 94 and 95 that we have added. And so if there's portions of this that you find that are sexist or are, discriminatory against female students, please help us identify those so that we can capture that and address it appropriately. And then there are some things, as you could well imagine, that students felt was wrong because, and when we asked them, they said, well, you guys don't understand current fashion. Guilty, absolutely guilty. But, I'm like, well, understood, but I mean, there is a line where we say you are still the students and we are still the adults, and this is where we're kind of at the whole thing.
What parts were they, did they leave?
The students wants to show, the students said they should be able to show the midriff. That was one of the examples they gave. They said, yes, we should be able to wear shirts like that.
Okay.
And so I was like, okay, and my skin being shown
But then
should
how
be.
do you
Exactly.
restrict how far up it goes?
Yeah.
How do you measure?
I mean, one
And who's
person,
measuring?
one that shows an
Yeah.
inch, and then one shows 3 inches, like, there's a difference, and then one really covers them all.
The ironic thing is when you grow up and you're an adult, companies tell us what we can and
Correct.
what to
Right.
wear. So
Exactly
I
You might not
always
even
find
get a
it,
job sometimes.
I find it
because of
hard to
it.
believe, I always find it hard to believe that the tail was wagging the dog in this situation.
Right.
Because when I grew up, I had to wear certain things, and my staff has to come, and if somebody showing their belly, shows up
Right.
at work, they're going home.
Yeah.
And it's kind of funny that kids think that they have all this freedom, but when you grow up and you're being paid to show up to work, you're being told what to do.
I think everything should be
Yeah.
covered. If they want to have purple hair, have purple hair. If you want to have pink hair, have pink hair. If you want a mohawk, get the mohawk. But just
But what?
cover up, like,
My point is where have we failed, that kids think that they have this ability to just be wild and crazy out
because
there.
we're not allowed to discipline
Whereas,
anymore, we do
whereas
restorative
when you show up
practices.
for work, you can't. I can send an employee home, and I'm not gonna be, the media's not gonna come after me. And now this parent is gonna take this to the media and go. I just, it's sad, because I don't think there's a real.
But this is the type of feedback, I need to be able to express to the board when we come to it, because the board has, said, they sat up a little bit taller in the chairs and took note, especially when students present at the public comment, and they also were aware of the media stories, and so they wanted, I feel it's incumbent for us to address this head on and not shy away from it, because it is, and this is not just a local issue, not just a state issue, it's a national issue.
Yeah.
And I don't believe it's distracting, but I believe there's just no way to regulate it then at all. I mean, then somebody can be in a wrong, I mean.
Well, and talking to the students, to me, as an individual, it felt it was more of a question of enforcement and approach as opposed to what was in here, But again, this is our document, so I do want to start to make sure that this is acceptable to our stakeholders. On the other side of it, working with schools on how to address and appropriately to enforce the policy.
And
That's
it's
something
consistent.
that our admins and our
Throughout the
deans
district.
have to do right, and they can't, say, one boy, hey, you're just some guy and you got your pants hanging low, whatever, and then get after some young lady because she's got her shoulders exposed, and you're gonna jump all over her and not address him, and that seems to be what resonates a lot with the kids. Yes, ma'am?
Okay, so I'm on page 94.
Yep.
And this is just my opinion. And I work in the private sector. But here we have principals have the authority with their staff and community as permitted by the school board to establish additional standards at individual schools. This to me is one of your biggest problems with the dress code. The standards need to be consistent. And they need to all be school board approved, with the exception of schools that choose uniforms. I feel like that's a separate thing. But I'll tell you why. Because the principals, I don't know, the principals rotate. They switch schools. They go to different schools. And so they could be at one school and establish this dress code. And I have students at Fort Myers High. So we had a principal for many years, the dress code was set in stone, we got a new principal, the dress code changed, but it changed 1 week before school. So that is mass chaos for parents, because what had happened was Fort Myers High, since my father went there and I went there, had never been a school that allowed shorts, right? So new principal came in, he said the week before school, you can wear shorts. Well, you have all these families that have already spent their back to school money, now all these kids want shorts, right? So everybody goes, buy shorts. I had a son, so that was all he wanted to wear, so we bought all shorts. After 1 year, the principal said, no, got a lot of pressure to change it back, teachers didn't like it. You know when he changed it back? 1 week before school started. Now, that's a nightmare. That's not fair to families in our communities that didn't budget for that. So to me, we need to have consistency. If they can wear shorts at one high school, they should be able to wear shorts at every high school. The dress code needs to be board approved, with the exception of a principal that wants to do uniforms. If parents vote that in, I don't have an opinion on that. But I think some schools like that and people choose that, so that's fine. But the dress code should be consistent. People switch schools, people move, and the other thing I'm gonna tell you is it is very hard to even find the dress code on some of the school websites. So when you're looking at schools for your kids, you really don't know what the dress code is.
Okay, thank you.
The other point I'd like to bring up about dress code issues is, I don't know how many teachers have had their voice included in these dress code policies, but having been a classroom teacher one time in the past, having to police dress code in addition to all the other responsibilities in your classroom is a lot to ask of teachers. So I would just ask that we also get the teacher's voice included in whatever dress code policy
And we do, on your point on that, the bargaining contract, is the correct term, you know what I mean, the contract that TALC has with the district, there's a discipline committee that is part of the code of conduct and all. And in fact, we meet with them on the 25th is our next meeting of this month, and we meet with them quarterly to get input, not just only about dress code, but not do discipline and all. So yes, we do have the teacher's voice, but with 6,000-7,000 of them, it's better to go to that committee than.
How about a compromise? Cover your stomach and you can wear a tank top and show your shoulders.
Okay. So
I had a semantic suggestion. I would suggest that you avoid using words like distracting or disruptive, because it invites that connotation that, oh, skin is disruptive or skin is distracting.
Okay.
So if you can be more objective with those terms, that instead of subjective, what is distracting or disruptive?
If a guy is gonna be distracted by a girl or vice versa, they're gonna do it whether their shoulders are shown or not. They're teenagers.
Okay. So, the other thing I wanted to mention, you guys are first on the rotation this year. However, if there's something that comes up, you go home, you have your kids read it, and they're like, well, Dad, and you're like, you know something, that's a pretty good idea. Please let Cindy know, and I'll be more than happy to come back to your next monthly meeting. Not to tear up all your time again, but just to listen, to get your feedback, and to have it as part of the record that we did come back and got those things. Because if you're like me, you walk away from something and then you have 5 questions pop up in your mind. You're like, well, why didn't I say that then? So be more than happy to come back, but I would ask for it by next month so that we can keep it in our whole entire time cycle of getting ready. And this way you don't feel like you have to, well, he only came one time and now I can't say anything for another year or so. At least 11 months. Kidding.
Does anybody that's on Zoom have any other additional informations that they would like, information that you would like to share? Or any questions?
I'm good.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Thomas.
I'm pretty good too. I just would reiterate that a lot of the themes that came up, Brian, were things that we discussed prior to this meeting. And I can see the valid points and a lot of the things brought up for consideration.
And again, I want to jump on that point. Yes, we discuss it, but I don't make the decisions, okay? I don't want anybody thinking that Brian Mangan, he's just sitting there gaslighting everybody, coming up with his own code of conduct, so. But no, Carol's right, we do have, and that's part of our whole cycle that we started a couple months ago with this thing, what's going on, what's happening, what should we be listening for when we're sitting down with individuals?
You're trying to be
Participate,
responsive
they feel more
to what's
involved, they're
going
more likely to read it and.
Yeah, and
Abide
right,
by it.
and contrary to what anybody may believe, like, we don't have another version, like, hidden anywhere, and we're gonna present that to the board, like, I have not downloaded and started any changes whatsoever. We really try to get out to the various groups to get your feedback. We need your feedback, we appreciate it, we highly respect your feedback, and then we take all of that feedback and we sit for hours on end combing through and making sure that we're, representing that piece of it.
Can you have a website that they have to go to for this, to read it, and that they have to print out the signature page like they used to, where the parent and the child both sign the same sheet? That way, at least
Yeah, I'm
they were directed
feeling
to the right
like
website.
there's definitely an area that we need to work on to ensure that we know that our parents have had the opportunity to see it, whether it's by highlights of key things that have come up and some kind of response. I thought that was a mechanism within Focus, but it may just not be as prominent as we need it to be. So
Like you can
there's
see what it's
something
on,
missing,
but there's
yeah,
Right.
exactly.
If you send something home with my children, I'm not getting it. It's
Right.
on the bottom of the back,
Correct.
under the binder.
Yeah, that's what they found in years past when they used to come out, or litter the hallway leading to the bus.
Right. And just so you are aware, as a parent group or members of our community, we do have a significantly high number of students that their parents are not connected in the Focus portal.
Yeah.
Significantly high. And we have done a lot of outreach and continue to do that But that is one of our barriers that we have, especially in regards to things like this, so.
Is the portal available in any language other than English?
Yeah.
Oh,
Many languages.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, it
All-
digital.
Yeah, so just
Maybe
so
like a little, like an app. Like it'd be really cool if you had a code of conduct app where it's on their phone
Well,
and they can like click on it and then you can
I
just
think,
flip them.
I think it would goes to what Dr. Thorpe was saying about, how do we get those Dunbar High whiz kids working on something like that?
Yes.
Because if you have,
said that,
if,
that's what
yeah,
made
if
me
you
think
have
of
it like so accessible, like where they can, and you make it like your cover, kind of, like you create a little symbol and then they know
what
immediately.
has that?
And if they download it onto their phone, they can reference it, the parent can really quickly, that's my thought. Because it's like a quick reference.
All right, well, thank you very much
Yeah.
for.
Sorry, we went long.
Yeah,
My
yeah.
apologies.
That was
We went
great.
long.
This, it seems like this year, every one of our presentations has gone,
Really good.
Well,
really
you
good.
guys have been great.
So,
Really good.
And we all love staying here till 8:30.
Well, then we're gonna go
On
ahead
that
and-
note, I'll see you later.
Oh, you're gonna leave, huh?
Before you go, Lucinda, I see your hand raised. Do you have a question? Or was that from before?
Yeah, I was just going to add that, I know that a lot of us, like, that have kids, look at the teacher notifications just because obviously the school activities are always listed on there, and there's a lot of important school information, and a lot of times since it comes to your email, you can just click on certain links, so I was just going to share with them that maybe in the interim, as maybe a pilot, maybe putting it on there, that way it stays top of mind and consistent, as the teacher flyer.
Great.
Thank you.
Give it a thumbs up to the cameras over there.
Thank you guys so
Thank
much.
you very much.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
appreciate you all being here.
And yes, you all get a free copy of the Code of Conduct.
They're
If you
limited.
want it in Spanish or Creole, let me know, I can do that for you
They are
also.
limited edition.
Thank you.
Yes, they are.
Yes, limited, because we get to make one every year.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Well, that was good, that was
Great.
Bye, Carol Ann, thank you.
another great presentation. All right, so I guess we're at the point now where recommendations to the board. Everybody sent their recommendations to Cindy last week, and Cindy, I'll turn it over to you to explain.
Thank you. Any additional recommendations you have for the code of conduct, if you will send those to me, I will either forward them on to Brian, or we can bring them, he offered to come back, so if we get a lot of them, then we'll invite him back, for maybe at the good of the order of our, or toward the end of our discussion, and get those to him. So I did get, recommendations from several people. They were so different in content that I didn't feel comfortable trying to reword those. So I thought instead that we needed to hear each of them, consider what the group would like to do, and kind of go forward from there. So for the people who are actually here, I think it would be best if you present your own rather than me try to present it for you. I printed out the emails that I received if people want to do them. The first one that I have is from Dr. Stork. And it wasn't a full recommendation, but some questions. So if you want to talk about those, I'll sort these out that you had about the comprehensive mental health program.
Yes, so we had the comprehensive mental health presentation, which was excellent, and Bill brought up House Bill, I think it was 519. So I did a little research on that, and I reached out to Cindy and asked her if that was a funded legislative mandate, and from what she was able to find out, it is not. But also, from my reading of the bill, and I may have missed something, Bill, so if I missed something, please clarify. But it seemed to me that there was no mandate necessarily in the bill or requirement for districts to offer additional health education that wasn't already being offered. It seemed to me that the bill was specifying the age range for certain health-related topics, and also including specific topics for children regarding sex trafficking and those types of issues. So I didn't see how that bill was necessarily a springboard for us to recommend to the district some of the things that we heard in the presentation by the district folks, because that bill didn't really address any of that. And the other issue I had was, because it was unfunded, I will, just because of my background, and I'll announce it very clearly, I will never make a recommendation to the board about an unfunded legislative mandate. So that's kind of where I'm at with that.
Yeah, unfortunately, many of the mandates are unfunded. And I believe after talking, I went back and talked to Alicia Roy again after I received that question. And Alicia said, they haven't funded anything. They've given us a lot of direction that we are to provide curricula, but no money to do so or any additional time within the school day to do so. So, we have a lot of curriculum has to be covered. However.
Well, that's good, let me comment to that, though. That's good to know, because the folks that we have coming, the elected officials to our meetings, they're acting like this thing was a big home run, but they never said it wasn't funded.
Right.
So this is like an ambush here.
Yeah.
I didn't realize it's not funded, and I'm gonna go back.
What does mandate mean?
Well, a legislative mandate is a passed bill, basically. It's something
But
that
it's
districts
enforceable,
are.
right?
Yes, it's something districts are required to do.
Yeah, they all voted for it, and then in July, Governor DeSantis was supposed to sign off on it, which I thought.
I think it's gone into effect, correct?
Yeah,
Yes.
he has signed off.
Yeah, he
on
has,
it.
but I didn't know that it
funding
was
is up to,
funded.
the funding is up to each individual district to fund it themselves to stay within the mandate.
Right,
So
so what,
so to your
the issue
point-
I have is
Yeah.
exactly this, if the state mandates a specific action that the district must take, but doesn't fund it, where does the money come from?
Well, see, that's the problem. Let me just finish mine. It's gonna take 30 seconds.
That's right.
Because I'm not giving a big speech here. But as you know, with the document I gave you, my suggestion was to build on that and to the next chapter that was in the presentation about mental health services and support of mental health and psychological professionals and staff throughout the state in school districts, to your point, about these kids have a problem. We don't have the staffing in place to coach and counsel and mentor these children and guide them. That's why I made that comment.
We just need to be able to give them the proper resources.
Right, so this is like,
I think I said the same thing.
this is number one embarrassing for me, because I assumed that it was funded.
Well, I appreciate that you're willing to go back and.
Well, no, I mean,
Take it back.
no, I'm gonna have to
There
prove
are
that,
a lot
you
of
know.
mandates that pass in this state that are not funded. The
Correct.
community and that doesn't mean that it's a bad thing necessarily. There's enough money, and I'm not saying, Michelle, that there's money just to be found, but there's plenty of money out there that's given from the state to entities, and they have to decide how they wanna use those monies. And so there could be mandates that have been made that somebody has to meet, just like in, I talk about insurance all the time. There are insurance mandates the state's put on insurance companies or on doctors or hospitals, and they're not saying, hey, we're mandating it, here's a big bunch of money to give you so you can pay for that. And the new reporting process. I mean, when the ACA came out, HIPAA came out, I mean, look at how much money that created or how much cost that created for the industry. So just because it's a mandate that was passed, doesn't mean that there needs to be funding. It's part of our job then to find the funding to pay for some of the new things that are out there.
I think my issue with that, though, is the perception in the local community becomes the district is not doing what the state has mandated, which is a very good idea.
Exactly.
So then it
Yeah.
creates this perception against the district that isn't actually accurate.
When they don't have the funding to provide certifications, the teachers don't have the certifications, we can't fund the teachers to teach, and we don't have any funding to provide, we can't pay them to get the certification. So it really becomes just a snowball effect of, we have these mandates, and if you look at all of the mandates of all the instruction that needs to be done, and then you look at the number of minutes in the day, they don't really match. So it's, how do you play with that, and how do you prioritize the mandates and what has to happen?
Funds to a certain extent too, like
Well, I think that in
for a
my
couple school properties
suggestions,
that we invested in.
in my suggestions, I thought about partnerships. Like if you partnered with things that already exist, like after-school programs or before-school programs to help kids, whatever their issues. Like if you need more time to work with a kid, you partner with maybe the Parks and Rec departments, or if the school already has, kids sitting in after school till 6 o'clock, and you have and they might need extra help, or they might need some mental health counseling, or whatever the issue is. That is they're captured there. So you don't have to recreate, and parents in some cases are already paying additional funds for that time. Why not just make it a higher, standard, maybe make it more useful rather than just purely recreational. I'm just using that as an example, if you don't have funds.
I'm speaking specifically to this health, the
The
House
mental
Bill
health,
519
yeah.
and the health education, because the way the bill is written, the education needs to be delivered in school, in the school
In the
day.
school
It's
day.
part of the curriculum. That's the mandate.
I think
So
we
it
should-
isn't a matter of partnering with
other
other
resources,
we-
not doing it ourselves.
So
It has
we
to
ha-
be
it
done
has to be
during
done
the
within
school
that
day
very
as part of the
specific time.
curriculum. So now we need to figure out how that's gonna
So
happen.
we gotta lobby for the funding.
Yeah.
that's,
Yeah.
I mean,
that's,
like, Bonita Springs just got $16.8 million this morning, everybody seen that?
For what?
Yeah.
On flood control, which is needed,
Wait,
I'm not trashing it, but there's money out there.
Wait, so before we go on, did they not do a portion of the presentation on funds as a result that were unspent from COVID?
Yeah.
Right, so
remember
there's
they said
COVID
that
money
they got
for the health.
$184 million.
Well, I certainly think that the mental health side of COVID absolutely positively should have been or could have been from those dollars.
Exactly.
Has there been a study on how much it was gonna cost
And,
to put to implement 519?
and they haven't spent it.
No.
So I guess I'm just
Not
saying
that I
that,
can
that to meet that immediate need, I mean, I think that there was a mental health immediate need, that was almost like an emergency.
So I think one of our recommendations should be to get a quantitative
Quantitative
number
Right.
of how much 519 is gonna cost to become compliant within the mandate, find out what the cost is going to be, and then then the job is to go lobby for that, or find it in the $184 million
That's
COVID
fair. I
monies.
mean,
So I think you have to figure out what the cost is before you can go to the next step.
That's excellent. I agree.
Hey,
Can I have a question, just out of ignorance? Can any of that stuff be included in HOPE, or, and I know nothing about it, and I'm not a teacher,
That I don't know.
into any of the existing courses?
Well, keep in mind, hope you get to, I learned, my
Get
kids
out
have
of
been
it.
a varsity athlete since freshman year, I had no idea, either did he, by
And
the
you
way,
could
he was,
opt out.
he was aggravated that he had to take it.
Right.
Now that I came home and told him, oh, by the way, you didn't have to take it. But he was never told that, but yeah, not everybody has to take hope.
I'm just looking at time, and in order to be respectful of time, I think my suggestion would be, you can't send everything to each other, but I can take these suggestions, and send them to you. Just no discussion can take place in between meetings, so that you would have a chance to look at them, draw out the commonalities, and come back with a better idea of how we wanna go forward. Now, that said, this morning at the chairperson meeting for all of the committees, the finance committee invited other committees to come to their February meeting, during which they are going to have a presentation on benefits. And I know that we had talked about staffing being a priority for this group. And so they're going to be looking at insurance and benefits for employees and talking about how we might be able to get better ones, basically, and use that as a recruitment tool.
I'll pay to go to that meeting.
Well, their meeting is February 16th, it's from 4 to 5:30. They're out
Are you
two
gonna send
different
us an
hours.
invitation?
Yeah.
Yes, I will. But
So
the-
would that be technically our meeting?
Well, that's the question. This group could decide to hold that, to go to that in lieu of, count that as our February meeting, or we could do both. I believe we're actually scheduled this, no, I think ours is the week before, actually. Ours is the week before.
Yeah.
So it could be, if we choose to go ahead and have our 9th meeting, then if people wanted to
Yeah.
attend, it would not be a required meeting, but you'd certainly be welcome. So what's the will of the committee?
Because I feel like we're really behind, and I feel like we're not gonna come out of here with a recommendation again. I think we should lean on
I'd rather have a meeting.
I'd rather
making
have a
and
I
moving
agree.
towards finding the funding amount for 519 before we come out with our recommendation, or not finding it out, but maybe making that our recommendation. I think we should have our normal meeting, and anybody who wants to attend, since they've asked us to, anybody who wants to attend that next week can do that.
And I do
Also,
have
I
one
have-
question, I have a clarification, if you don't mind. Is the mental health and the health education comprehensive, are they two separate things?
The House Bill 519, at least what I read, does not address specifically mental health.
No, that's why I added it.
Right, so it's like
Right.
mental health is separate
Yes,
than the
Correct.
health education one, so they,
yes.
Yes.
so I don't know if it's appropriate to ask for the comprehensive health education money from the COVID money, but certainly the mental health on its own certainly would warrant. Because there's so much increased mental health issues related to the COVID, I don't know, I just thought that.
And by the next meeting, we may have the draft, of how the COVID funding, the ESSER funding, right now they're working on finalizing how that's going to be spent, so we may have that draft by that point.
It's also a finite number and
3 years.
finite, date also.
Yes.
So
I think
it's
there's
not like
a
that's
deadline of
ongoing
when
money
you
forever.
can apply for that
Do you know
funding.
when is that deadline? It's not a sustainable
It-
funding source either.
Right, it won't,
Correct,
it won't continue, right, I understand.
They've turned in a draft, I haven't seen the finalized draft, I know they've turned in a draft which with, knowing that they can go back and do amendments to it. And I believe it was due right before winter break. So we should be able to access that by our next meeting.
Okay,
I
so,
hate to do this, I gotta cut it.
okay, alright.
Thank you.
So we don't need to make a motion because we're gonna keep our regular meeting, scheduled meeting, and then anybody who wants to attend the next week for the finance committee meeting, you're more than welcome to do that. And you'll send us the invite for that.
Yeah, sure.
Alright, thank you. And then I feel more comfortable right now that we're almost there. But I also think that this presentation will create a second thing for us pretty quickly, that we'll be able to present forward as well for a second topic.
And actually 3, we have tech, schools, mental health, and now code of
Correct.
conduct.
Correct. So is that, we're good with talking about that and making our game plan? This would be the time for public comment.
Don't believe we have any public on board, no.
That was quick. Go to the order. Can you go to the order?
I have a really quick one.
Okay.
It's just so that I can stay clear. I'm wondering if on the agenda we could, where we have the topics that we're going to be covering on the agenda, we would also put where in the strategic plan that topic fits.
Absolutely.
Just to keep track of what items in the strategic plan we're covering.
We
Okay,
can
thank
do
you.
that.
Ramey?
Yeah, I would love just to bring this issue up and see if this board has an appetite to discuss it and maybe make a recommendation. I might make a motion tonight if you do, if not, I'll respect that. But when I look at the strategic plan, I see leadership as a really big aspect. And I'm worried because right now we have an interim superintendent here in Lee County and we're hiring a permanent, and we have pending legislation that is likely going to get approved in Tallahassee in the session that could make it so the voters in November 2020 will decide if we go back to an elected superintendent. So whether Lee County voters vote to do that or not, we don't know. We won't know until that November election, but it's very likely that it will be on the ballot. So to me, we've got this pending now where we know, everybody knows that Lee County might put this on the ballot, and we've done this superintendent search, we've spent all this money. I don't know if you guys have reviewed the applicants. We all got a letter today from Ms. Jordan, not sure why it wasn't from the entire board, but only Ms. Jordan has signed it. And in this letter, I see so many issues. She says the application deadline was December 13th. That is crazy to me that they would have closed off an application in December and not taken it at least through January, so I don't understand that. But they've narrowed it down to 5 candidates. I've reviewed all the applications, I've reviewed the qualifications, I don't see any of them as qualified as the interim we currently have right now, even on the list, but it feels like the board is gonna move ahead and hire one of these 5 candidates as their plan, and watching the meetings last week, and I think this is really scary for the future of Lee County. I think this candidate could come in July with a huge target on his back because the position may go elected in 4 or 5 months. So, I mean, if I did make a motion tonight, if you guys had the appetite to discuss it, it would be to tell the board to suspend the search until November, because I think we're wasting money at this point with not qualified applicants. I think this all should have been suspended until we know what voters decide in November.
I have a question. If that were to pass in Lee County, wouldn't the existing superintendent's contract supersede? So the next time a superintendent is needed, no, it would
No,
not.
there's
Okay.
actually been a lawsuit where, and I don't remember if it was in this state or another state, where the election took place, and the superintendent sued, saying that his contract entitled him to complete his contract, and he lost.
Okay, I just wasn't sure about that.
I was wondering if we could be sued for breach of contract then.
Well, these people that are
Contract
applying,
would only
these
be
people that are
18
applying, shame on them if they don't know
Know
that
that.
this is potential. I mean, who would apply
It happens.
I know, but, obviously the discussion is great. I don't think it's in our scope as part of the strategic plan that we could have a motion for that to the board. Cindy, am I correct in that?
Basically, the mission of this group is to make recommendations about the goals that are included in the strategic plan, which would not include a superintendent search or a hiring of a superintendent. It really is directed, I mean, the intent of the committee was to look at what are the goals that are in there, and what are the objectives? Do you believe that the objectives are appropriate? Do you believe that the goals are worthy goals? To look at the strategies, and are those appropriate or not?
Isn't leadership one of the goals?
No, not
Not
specifically leadership. There's
Leadership in general.
There is a goal around having a future-ready workforce, which really is based upon employees. So very, very broadly, you might be able to include the superintendent in that.
I read it, I definitely think it's in the purview of this committee because I think it affects the overall future of the district and I mean, if our leadership, I don't know, I guess I would ask this committee, have you guys looked at the 5 applicants?
I actually have notes with me tonight about the 5 applicants, so yes, I have.
Okay.
And one of them signed a 3-year contract and didn't even complete a year of it in Wise County, Virginia.
Really?
I do think that it's incumbent upon every community member in Lee County to get involved in this process and make their voices heard to the board regarding their thoughts about the superintendent search. I do not agree that it's under the purview of this committee.
I would have to, I'm looking at the strategic plan, because anything within, and Attorney Bruno confirmed that at the last meeting, anything with the strategic plan is within the purview.
So then I would advise this committee that there's hiring committees being formed all throughout Lee County. If you have, or I mean, the board is forming hiring committees. So if you haven't been asked to be on one, I think the names are going out Friday. The board members each, I believe, got 5 picks of community members they could pick on the hiring committee. I would say try to get involved because, I don't know, I mean, it's.
I agree. I'm happy you brought it up. I don't think we can make a motion, but it's good discussion. We're all human beings and part of the community.
No, we all have opinions on
Yeah,
this.
I mean, Bill and I
We
hated at the end
We
of
thought
last
it was
year.
very unfair that they have Savage in there, who's been around a long time, and he wasn't even allowed to apply.
Yeah,
I don't think that was
Well,
fair.
he did apply.
Well,
he
I was
wasn't
under the
allowed to.
impression, originally, I was under the impression that originally any candidate who was chosen as interim would not be able to be
That's right.
considered.
Correct.
But that was
Originally.
changed,
Yes.
correct?
And that
Yeah.
is actually within his contract that he agreed not to apply.
Okay.
Right.
The board has had several comments that they realized that it was not an enforceable agreement. However, it did represent the agreement between the two of them.
Right.
And back to, you can bring any motion that you wish to bring. If the group agrees that it's within the purview, they can pass it. If they do not believe it's within the purview, then it
Right.
will fail.
So if you want to make a motion, you can make a motion. We can ask for a second in discussion and then vote.
Yeah, I'll respect I'll respect the committee and if, consensus is you guys don't think it's in the purview, that's fine, I respect
Well,
that.
I mean, the consensus, I said it, I didn't think it's in mine, that doesn't
Sure.
mean that it's in
No, I
anyone
agree
else's.
with what you're saying, like, I would support that, but I can't find anything that's strategic, and I said, well, I'm just bringing it up here.
So-
It's really important.
But hey,
I
it's
think everybody should be paying
important to you,
attention to it.
and it's gonna make all of us look and research a little bit more as well. But me personally, as a business person, why would you apply
Apply
for
for
the thing
that.
if they're,
That's-
I mean, that just makes.
Well, I would love, I've been asked to be on the hiring committee and I absolutely said yes, so I will be on it and I wish our superintendent was on it. I really wish he was one of the with other candidates, but I'd love to hear people's
You can always
thoughts
run.
after when you.
Yeah, you can always,
He
you
can
can
run.
always run when it becomes, if it
But
becomes.
it would really be, it would actually
Superintendent.
behoove if they didn't do this, if they did not go through with the hiring,
I agree.
because
That's
Well, we've
Randy's
already
point.
spent how
That's
much-
my motion,
Put
is
a
that
point
we, as, I'm thinking strategically that this board is making a mistake by moving forward with
or
this
continue
right
paying
now. Because I think this should be put on hold until November. That's, I guess that's what I was.
Well, there is a website
How much
on
money
the
we
on our website, there's a web page about the superintendent search, and there is a comment box on there. So you can use that to put forward those ideas. You can also, once you have, once they've posted the interviews, even if you're not part of the hiring committee, everyone is able to go on and watch those interviews and provide your input. So please do, if you're not part of it, please, be actively involved.
Yeah.
Any other good of the order? 7:45, is that the earliest one? 44. We don't have to have a motion to adjourn, I was told last time. We are adjourned.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everybody
Was
that was on
that
Zoom
for the
tonight.
good of the order?
Appreciate you being here.
Was that for the good of the order?
Is there a link for it on the website?
No.
Just